For this podcast, I did a few homework. I did end up reading some of the comics, and I will show you two of the comics I've read for this current session of film and shows adaptation. So I read Superman vs. Lex Luthor, so it's several stories involving Lex, either as the main character or the main antagonist. That was quite fun, and yeah, I really enjoyed that book. And the next one I did end up reading was this compilation there. It's still in the sleeve because I want to protect the books I have. And it's really the first story about Superman in the late 30s. And that was enjoyable. And I learned he could not fly back then. They added flight much later in Superman history.
And I am live. Welcome to Movies and TV Shows Adaptation. I just butchered the name of my own podcast. Anyway, I am Multi-Topic Talk. I hope all of you will enjoy. I was hoping to maybe get a guest or two, but looks like I will be alone for this episode. Now, this episode, we will be talking about Smallville Season 1, Smallville Season 2. Now, I will be honest, I have seen that show many times. I actually grew up with that Superman. I was a bit young when the show came out. I wasn't exactly the target audience, but let's be honest, it's Superman, and Superman is meant to be enjoyed by people of all age. So even back then when I wasn't able to understand everything, I was able to like the show. Now, I will be blunt and honest. I think the first two seasons are actually the worst in that TV show history. Well, actually, season 4 is the worst. Season 4 is rock bottom. It's terrible. But season 1 and 2 are also very weak when compared to 3, 5, and 6 and upward. I have the very odd take that season 5 and upward is when the show really got better, more fun, more entertaining, more interesting, and they tried to do new things, and that's my experience. So if you have nostalgia, I am truly sorry. I will tear apart the first two seasons because I think these are the weakest seasons the show had, alongside season 4, because season 4 is poison. Very sorry for all of the season 4 fans out there. Anyhow, this is the premise of this show, and now let's get into it. This show is about growing up. It's about Superman, or I should say Clark Kent, when he was still a teenager, growing up. And it's a product of its time. And it came out in 2001. And we had the Lana Lang from past movies being Martha Kent this time around because she's much older. And that's interesting. And let's be honest. Without Smallville, we won't have the Arrowverse. The DC TV scene wouldn't be the way it is right now. It wouldn't be that great. Smallville, in some ways, is the reason why we got so many superhero TV shows. One can also argue maybe that's the reason we got so many movies about superheroes. So again, that review is coming from my art, and I will be honest. And now it's time for me to kind of tear it apart, because I had so many issues on this most recent watch, because I did end up rewatching season 1 and 2 recently. So my first issue, way too many filler episode. It's a product of its time. Let's be honest. 2001 TV, they wanted to hook you for like the school year. So from the fall until the spring, they want to lock in and watch every week something. And the end result is, well, we got 22 episodes a season. And I think when you are driven into making episodic things, you end up having a lot of filler. A lot of filler. If you don't have a story that goes on for the entire season, of course, you will have pointless episode. There are things that connect with each other in that first season, but there's just so many filler episodes. I feel like we could make, if we remake the Smallville TV show, that first season could have an easy 12 to maybe 14 episode, maybe. I don't think 22 episode was needed. But again, it's a product of its time. It's not the only show that's been doing it. A lot of other shows are still doing it today because they are popular, because they have impact and such. So again, filler. Filler is not great. I'm not a fan of filler stuff. But it happened. That was season 1. And again, that goes back to something I said earlier. I feel like the later seasons were far better. And you know why they were far better? We were less in that optic of having episodic thing. We actually had a story for the entire season with a big bad guy. I won't spoil it yet. I will give you some time to watch season 5. But again, we will spoil season 1 when we will get to the rest of the review. So be advised. It's about time you end up watching this show. My next issue with this first season, lots of the dialogue felt off and over the top. It wasn't that great. And again, it's the product of its time. And I don't know what they were thinking when they were making TV back then, because sometimes the dialogue was weird. And it's funny because as of right now, I'm watching for the first time Lois and Clark New Adventures of Superman. That's even the worst. But yeah, that's what's going on. And now my next issue with this first season, the two love triangle were unbearable. So we got Chloe, Lana, and Clark, and Whitney, Lana, and Clark. That was dreadful. That's one of the many things I want to forget I have seen about this TV show. Each time I review it, each time I rewatch it, I roll my eyes. This is bad. Please stop with Love Triangle. Especially when they are so poorly written and so bad and so painful. Now, I will be honest. I've seen the Talkville podcast all the way up to like season 3 or 4 when they started complaining about not having enough people subscribing and paying for it. Now, I get it. It's a business. It costs money. But the moment they started acting like that, and they're superstars, right? They have money, and it was proof they were not really doing it for fun. They were doing it for money. But again, that's a tangent I didn't really want to get into, but let's get into it. Basically, what they were saying in the Talkable podcast is, you know what? This show had a dynamic with triangles with characters. And in this most recent watch, I have seen that dynamic. That was a quite interesting aspect. But then we got these two love triangle I truly despise and hate it so much. But I kind of get what they were trying to do with the writing of the show. Overall, the writing of the show was good. But these love triangle were the most annoying and unbearable things, especially in the early seasons of the show, because later on, they're not as bad or on your face like every week. Now, my fourth issue with this first season, lots of the freak of the week were forgettable. Let's be honest. They wanted to fill in 22 episode, there's no way in hell, even with the best writer, that with a freak of the week, you always end up with a gem and a good one. You will miss the mark, especially when your entire show is around the freak of the week. New week, new enemy, new monster, new story. And this is why I think in later season, it's better because there's a story going on, so it's not always that freak of the week aspect. Um, so that goes back to season 1 and 2 being kind of weak. Let's be honest. Let's be honest here. Issue number 5. Lots of the story was contrived and it didn't work. It's like plot convenience or character does stupid crap for the plot to happen. The 6th issue would be as much as Pete had great moments. He was a filler character. And it's tragic because I think Pete is great in season 2 with what they are doing with him, and in season 3 as well. But in season 1, Pete is just there to be the diversity hire. Pete is just there to say, you know what, Clark has friends. And it's nothing against the actor or the character. It's just, it wasn't that needed. And he had less of a role than Chloe. Chloe, at least, she was pushing and driving lots of the story parts, while Pete was just hanging around and being like, oh, bro, you're my big boy, you're my friend, and that's it. But again, that's nothing against the character or the actor, because I think in season 2 he gets really good material. It's really season 1. He is that character that's there, but that doesn't really get a character arc. He's not that needed. And you can make that first season story work very well, because anyway, Clark already had Lex as a friend. So Pete is just another Lex, but not as interesting because he doesn't get that much of a character arc. And it's kind of unfortunate. Now, the next issue. Too much episodic in making the show having a serious lack of continuity. That goes back to the filler aspect I mentioned as my first issue. When you get to see a few Smallville episodes, you're like, okay, I get the idea. Move on. Why do I need to watch 22 episodes? And I think the fact that they really wanted that episodic vibe and flavor that was quite popular back then, and I think it's still somewhat popular. It's not as popular as it's used to be, but it's still a thing now. It did really drag down the show a lot. And now I sounded overly negative on the first season, but there's a lot of things to like. And now let's get into the things I did enjoy about the first season of Smallville. The first big like, Clark arc into embracing relationship and taking more risk was okay. Lana arc into finding her identity as stepping up as a businesswoman was cool. Whitney growth into respecting Clark, leaving the military was great. And I will also tell you this, I wasn't the biggest Whitney fan. He is weak, but he was more needed than Pete. And he had more of a character arc than Pete. And it's unfortunate, because that's the only season where Whitney is really around for the entire time. And to be honest, he was just the love interest of Lana. So how can the love interest of Lana be more interesting than Clark's best friend or previous best friend before Lex showed up? It just doesn't work. But hey, Whitney is, after many watch, I don't think he's the worst part. He is actually very good and he is interesting. Now, parallels between Clark's family being about love and care, while Lex is about looking good and being rigid but loveless, was a very fun thing to explore. So I should say it's more of a contrast because it's nature versus nurture. You can tell by many exchange. Most of the Lionel episodes were great. They were that continuity that was missing in most of the rest of the season. Lionel and Lex together, they made that show great. And removing Whitney to add Lionel in season 2 was a great thing. Again, praising season 2 because that's the next thing we will cover very soon. But yeah, Lex struggling and trying hard to be different than his dad was really cool. And in this first season, we get to see he has a shady past. Lex has a shady past, right? He has a very shady past. But here's the thing. He doesn't want that past to define him at that point. At that point, Lex is like, you know what? I want to be better than this. And this is why he adores and likes so much his relationship with Clark. And with Clark's family, he sees that other people do things differently. And maybe if he hangs out enough with Clark, maybe he will become more like Clark. Isn't that good? I think it's good. Do more of that, please. Just do more of that. And the next thing. Most of the supporting characters were solid. Jonathan and Martha, let's be honest. They were more there to have parents figure. They were not like these characters that were so much needed with such a great character arc. Martha has actually really good character arc in season 2. And Jonathan as well, actually. And Jonathan and Martha gets better as the show goes on, to be honest. And season 1, that was the worst season for Martha and Jonathan, but it was still enjoyable. It was still very good. And speaking of supporting cast, Chloe, she was a bit more than just that love interest. She was a key, a door open for the viewer to learn more about the lore of the universe, and she was a tool helping Clark in his journey into becoming Superman eventually. Chloe at that point was actually really good. I think Chloe's worst season was most likely season 2, but season 1, Chloe was really good. And again, every of the supporting character are good. Even some of the recurring guests, like Lex's girlfriend. Actually, she's in season 2. I mixed up things. I've seen the 2 seasons like back to back, like a few weeks ago. Sorry about that, but yeah, I think this first season did start a very good universe. It did start a very good TV show. And without that first season, we won't have anything we have today, comic book accurate or not. We won't have Superman that big. Smallville was probably the first time a lot of people got to meet Clark Kent, and not necessarily Superman, because that TV show is more about Clark Kent than Superman. Because Superman is not there yet. It's him growing up to be Superman. That's the idea of that TV show. And yeah, I will just tell all of you my grade for this first season, and then we will talk about season 2. But again, I think, despite my dislikes, I think it was a pioneer. It was a great start for such a universe. And this first season has a 5 out of 10 for me. And it's because of the reasons I had, the issues I had. They do drag down that first season. And now let's get into season 2. Season 2 was an improvement. It did everything season 1 did, but this time around, better. Actually, I almost forgot something very important before we really move on to season 2. I think it's relevant to mention top 3 episodes and worst 3 episodes. So my top 3 episodes of this first season. Jitters with a 10 out of 10. Zero with a 9.9 out of 10. And Tempest with a 9.7 out of 10. So these are my top 3. In first place, we got the one I said, second place and third place. Now let's get into the worst three episode of that first season for me. Leech, Drone, and Og. Leech, Drone are both episodes I don't want to rewatch. I've seen them too many times. They're filler BS. They are really bad and painful to get through. And even if Leech has somewhat of a nice idea with Clark being normal the way he wanted to be for so long, it, it it's not great. I don't like it when Superman is not Superman in my Superman show. And it's interesting to see another kid using the same powers and acting in a very different way. It was cool, but overall, I'm here to see Clark punching bad guys. That episode wasn't that, and that's why I didn't like it. And about Og was like a filler BS. Every bad thing about that first season was in Og, the episode Og. So yeah, let's truly dive deep into season 2 now. Season 2, as I premised it and said it, was an improvement. It did everything season 1 did right, and it also did some of the wrong, but still felt like an improvement. So let's start off this time around. Let's be a bit more original than anything else. I'd say in this second season, my worst 3 episodes were Daichotic. It's basically the twins. We had the unbearable like Lana, Chloe, and Clark stupid love triangle BS that I truly despise, and that was bleeding all over that season. Then we got the very cringy and weird episode Rush, which is my second least favorite that season. That was painful to watch. All of the cringe, and let's be honest, parts of it was like decent, like Pete partying and trying to convince Clark to party as well. That was cool, but that episode just didn't age well at all. Like, I don't know what they were thinking or doing back then in that writer's room, making that Rush episode. There's so many good things, but it's not well done. I'm sorry. Now, the third worst would be Witness. It would be Witness, and I will be honest, Witness was another really cringe fest, and it didn't age well. I feel like a lot of the episodes I didn't like in both seasons didn't age well. And it's funny because I say that, and it's like 10 times worse with Clark and Lois, New Adventures of Superman, a show we will cover in 2 weeks. It's far worse. Anyhow, to get back on track, so that was my worst 3 episode for season 2. Now let's get into my top 3 episodes of season 2. My favorite episode of season 2 was Ryan. A really good comeback for Ryan. A very cool Freak of the Week from season 1. And the send-off is great. The message is great. It was a so endearing episode. I did tear up each time I end up watching that episode. I tear up, and now I'm sweating because here it's like a big heat wave. But Ryan was a rock solid episode. Suspect is my second favorite episode of that season, with Jonathan being framed for deleting someone or attempt to delete someone. That was quite a good episode. The murder mystery was very fun, and it felt refreshing in that Freak the Week aspect. And my third favorite episode of that season was Lineage. Lineage reflects very well one of the many themes, one of the many ideas season 2 had in the store for Smallville. So Lineage, that's why it made the cut to top 3 episode. Anyhow, now that I shared my top 3 and my worst 3 episodes season 2. Let's get into my issues. And again, I'm honest there on this show, on this channel. So if you are a big Smallville fan, I'm sorry I tear apart your beloved show. I say that because I remember the last time I did a Smallville review. That was season 5, or maybe not last time, but one of the previous stream I did. People were like, but stop tearing the show apart. I'm like, but I need to. It's the point of a review, you know? Like, you cannot be all shiny, all great. You need to be critical of things. You need to criticize. You need to review things. Anyhow, my first issue with season 2. Love triangle, the Lana, Clark, and Chloe love triangle was unbearable. Remember when I said I hated the love triangle with Whitney, Lana, and Clark season 1? That was really bad. I feel like this time around, season 2 did a number. They only had one love triangle. That was far worse than both love triangle we had in season 1. I despise that love triangle in season 2. It made me hate Chloe so much. And I know I'm not the only one. I know it. Like, there's no way in hell I'm that crazy. I'm crazy sometimes, but I think she was unbearable. That's Chloe's worst season. Because I remember the other seasons. There's no season where she sinks that low and where she is so bad. Like, out of spite and jealousy, anger, all of the bad emotion you can get, parts of her character arc in the end is to turn to Lionel and help Lionel investigating Clark. Because she didn't get to be in Clark bed? Or I should say in a relationship with him? Chloe. And when you know the actress, that gets even worse. I won't get into it, but like, even the actress is so problematic. And I can look elsewhere and not think about the actress and just think about Chloe, but Chloe in season 2 is bad. Now my second issue with season 2. Lots of the dialogue was weird and it didn't age well. That's something that was there in season 1 and it's back here with season 2. The cringe, the weirdness of some of the exchange between characters. It was painful. It was bad. I feel like the dialogue was even worse in season 2 than 1. Now, my third issue, pacing wasn't great with the entire season, since many episodes could have been considered filler. I repeat myself because that was another issue I had with season 1. I see a pattern there, and this is why season 1 and 2 are my least favorite alongside with 4. 4 is just a disaster. I cannot wait to roast to bits season 4 once we get there eventually. But 22 episodes? I'm sorry, but you don't need that long. Well, actually, I think that one was 23. Yeah, I think it was 23. That's even worse than 22. I have 22 in my mind. I think it's because of the later seasons. Starting with season 3, I think it's 22, but 23 episodes is way too long. If you don't have a season-long story, if you don't have like a big bad that's lurking around. Because let's be honest, at that point in season 2, Lionel is still a very great character. He does really bad things. He is a bad guy, but he's not a full-on bad guy we get to see really with season 3 and season 4. They really build him into a big bad with season 3 and 4. But in that season, there's a lack of continuity, just like season 1. It's unfortunate. It's sad. It's bad. Now, my fourth issue, parts of the story were contrived. And that's all for my issues. I had less issues with Smallville season 2. I think Smallville season 2 was a lot more enjoyable than 1. But I feel like each time I end up rewatching, that season gets slightly worse. Let's be honest here on how I truly feel about that season. Now, I was very harsh. I was very negative. Let's praise all of the good things because I think again, it's an improvement. Season 2 was better. The issues were heavy. They were annoying. They made me kind of regret selecting this show to review, but the likes are there. They will deliver. So the likes, the first like, theme of origin and lineage was well addressed and depicted. Clark learned about Krypton. Lana learned about her biological father. Chloe's desire for friendship to make up for her mother's absence was cool. Lake's trust issue coming from his dad made sense. Clark also needing to lie to protect his secret was another thing following his origin and how he was raised by the Kents. And it's a trope, it's something that keeps coming back in most of the Superman media overall. Even in the comics, everywhere, it's everywhere. The Kents are paranoid to protect their son, and their son, he's still paranoid as he grew up. Now, another thing to enjoy, the action was entertaining, and there's a lot of it. There's a lot more going on with that TV show with season 2. Now, the next bullet point. Clark anger issues was a new addition to his character, making him more layered, more interesting. Pete got great material because now he is the friend that knows the secret and that can bring new dynamic in the show. And that was great. Now Pete feels justified. He is a different character than Lex, and he has his own purpose, and he is actually a better friend than Lex because he's in the secret. And that's by design. Because anyway, Lex will grow up to be a bad guy eventually in the show. We all know that. And Pete will be one of the pillar that will forge Clark into the hero he is. And I always remember season 3 where Pete abused of that friendship. Cannot wait to get into season 3, to be honest. But to get back to season 2, Jonathan character being more fleshed out felt great. Substance use sub team was well depicted through every Red Kryptonite episode. Rush and that's interesting. More meat. Fun approach with Clark refusal to embrace his destiny. Him choosing to run away instead of facing hardship made sense for a teenager. The season did everything season 1 did, but in a far better way and a far more effective way. Overall, the season was consistent, more good than bad. And I don't have as much to say. That's unfortunate, but here we are. Season 2 for me is a solid 6.5 out of 10. And I remember a past review I gave a 7, but on this most recent watch, I'm like, it's just below average. And now we get into a very interesting segment of this show. That segment is the tier list. And now I will be blunt and honest. That tier list will evolve and change in future streams. It's just a prototype right now because I'm not done rewatching the show. I've only rewatched season 1 and 2 for this current podcast there. So let's screen share. I will zoom in a lot so people can truly see. Again, it's subject to change. And now, my bottom 3, I already spoiled something about season 3. Asylum is painful. I despise Asylum. So we all can see it. Now, Leech and Roan, let's be honest. Leech and Roan, I can swap them. Or, actually, you know what? I think I'd place Leech maybe above Roan. Only because Leech was to tell you, look, if other kids than Clark gets the power, they will do bad things. And Drone was another way where they really wanted Lex to feel very distinct to Clark, and that was interesting. That was fun. But yeah, Leech slightly better than Drone. Asylum clearly better than the other two, but these are the worst three episodes as of right now, and this is subject to change in the future. So let's take a look. Let's take a look. So I delete the ad. So perfect. Diegetic, Ugh, they're both the bottom of the barrel, and Diegetic is just it just feels worse than Ugh for so many reasons. Rush, Witness, very weak. Redux had decent ideas, but I don't think it worked well. Nocturne and Cool. So again, so these are the interesting parts. Jitters. Jitters is a pillar for that entire TV show that explain why Clark becomes a hero, his parents. That explain why Lex becomes a villain, the parents again. So that's how it is. That's how it is. Now, again, I will repeat myself. This is subject to change as we review season 3 and 4 for this podcast. This will change. As we have seen the entire show, this will change. Anyhow, we are moving into a freestyle part. I never did that before. This is the source of material segment. So I never did that before, and here we are. I will stop the screen share. I'm full here. Now this is quite art. I knew going into Smallville, they would take a lot of liberty, a lot of freedom when it comes to adapting Superman. And that's why I read so much of the very old comics. I've read Rewind. I've read a lot of the Silver Age, a lot of the Golden Age. I've read a lot of Superman comics. The Lex Luthor comic was one of my priority because I knew Lex Luthor was such a big part of the Smallville TV show, the Smallville lore. Now, I will tell you this. In all of the comics I've read, and I might be wrong because I didn't read every Superman comics that exists. I might be wrong there, but among all of the Superman comics I've read, we only get glimpse of Clark as a teenager through the untold stories, through the Superboy issues, because they call it issues. So there's nothing like Smallville in the comics. Therefore, a lot of freedom was taken. And even Lionel is mentioned at most in some comics. I've seen him in maybe 2 or 3 different comics, and he is not that big of a character. We know Lex has daddy issues at some point, but for most of the history, Lionel was just an afterthought. So it's really hard to say, how comic accurate it is. Lex, as of right now, it's part of his character arc to become Lex Luthor, the big bad guy that wants Superman, that wants to tear apart Superman. It's part of his character arc in the Smallville TV show. But the point of him is not necessarily to be there yet. The Hourglass episode in the first season was a nice foreshadowing. And it's accurate to the kind of man he will become because he wants world domination, he wants to be a president, and he wants to destroy everything. And I will also say one thing that is very accurate to the Lex in the comics. How obsessed Lex is to Clark. In the comics, Lex is so obsessed over Superman. He will drop everything over Superman, and when Superman vanishes or dies, you have Lex in the background crying because he's like, oh, I wasn't the one that did it. That's Lex in a nutshell. And I feel like Smallville, even if Lex is not quite there, he is not quite a villain yet. He is in that very gray area. He wants to be good. He wants to be better. He will get there. Lex is very accurate. He is a rich guy. He is very smart and clever. The comics, he is really smart and clever. The Kents, I feel like I haven't read enough of the Kents in the comics, but what I've read gives me enough to say that Jonathan and Martha Kent are really accurate in that TV show. They are supportive of Clark. They are the moral compass of Clark. They are the wisdom Clark desperately needs. They are the reason why Clark becomes a superhero. And even if in the comics they're mostly not there, the ones I read at least, they are still lurking, and you know as a reader, it's because of Jonathan and Martha. And it's interesting. So I think they are very accurate. Now, Lana was also depicted as a sweetheart, Clark first love in a lot of comics. So this is very accurate. I haven't read enough of Lana really in the comics to have a glimpse or an idea that what kind of character she should be. But this is what she is in the Smallville TV show. The sweetheart of Clark, of Superboy. Even if he's not called that way, let's pretend he is because we read the comics. Now, what else? Chloe wasn't in the comics. She was added after Smallville, which is a good sign. Because when you add something after the show came out, that means the show left an impact to convince you, you know what? That character is actually cool. Pete, I don't remember seeing his face in any of the comics I've read. I don't remember hearing about his freaking name. The same goes for Whitney. So these two characters, I don't think they exist before the Smallville TV show came out. Maybe they were added in later comics after Smallville because they realized Smallville had such a cultural impact that they needed to add these. So what other character left off? Well, actually, a lot of the Freak of the Week, they are probably just from that TV show that is Smallville. I don't remember these Freak of the Week being in any of the comics, and maybe that's just me that has really bad memory because I've just read so many comics about Superman in the last 6 months that I just cannot remember everything. But I think the Freak of the Weeks are mostly created only for Smallville, which is good. That's the point. There's another thing. Overall, the approach to episodic thing, I think, even if that's an issue for me, I think it worked very well. And it gave an idea. Look, we are just like a comic put into the big screen or the medium screen. So overall, I think the episodic thing reflects very well the comic things. When you read the comics, especially like before the 70s, 70s and above, I didn't read enough Superman to really know. The only thing I really read 70 and above was like The Exile and Death and Return of Superman. I've read these two. Well, Birthright as well, but like these omnibus, I've only read as of right now anything that's before the 70s. And it's very episodic like. So I understand why the TV show did that. It was popular back then. It was a very easy way to craft a show. And comics were also episodic back then. It's the receipt. Now, my ending statement about the source of material segment. I think season 1 and 2 took a lot of freedom and liberties. It's not like the comics I've read, but the characters are very accurate. The formula feels like what we had in 1938 when Superman first came out. And back then, Lex was not as good as in this TV show because it was just all about let's conquer the world. I hate Superman. I'm glad Smallville didn't do that right off the bat. Thank you. So because they took so much liberties and freedom, I think it's really hard for me to voice an opinion on how accurate this is. The characters are clearly on point based on my experience. So because of that, I'd say this Smallville first 2 seasons, they deserve a very strong 9 out of 10. When we talk about like accuracy and how it feels like the comics, it felt like the comics. It's a very good adaptation. Is it perfect? I don't think so. I don't think so because maybe they took a bit too many freedom and liberties for me. I would have liked to see more of a character arc, like something we had in 2 or 3 issues in a row in the books. Because sometimes we had very brief storyline with 3 chapters or so. I would have liked that more with Smallville. But I think the accuracy of the characters is on point, and that's why I think it's a 9 out of 10 when it comes to accuracy and the adaptation itself. It's a great adaptation. It's near perfect. Almost. And this was the first time I had such a segment on one of my show. I'm proud of that because I did so much homework. I did read thousands of pages of comics for this show. I'm glad, I'm proud. I'm no longer a very stupid comic fan that's not really a comic fan because I've only seen the media. No, I've read the media. And this was the source of material segment. So if you like that show right now, you know what to do. You do like, comment, and subscribe. But I'm not quite done. I will tease what will happen next because this was the first episode of the film and shows adaptation. Next week, we cover Superman and Lois, season 1 and 2. We will do the same thing. We will review both seasons of a show I adore. And then we will have a tier list. And then we will have a juicy moment where we talk about the source of material. Yes. With that being said, we are out. Thank you a lot. Do all of the YouTube stuff. Support the channel. Support the show. See you next time.